Hi everyone, my name is Shannon Johnson and I'm the Learning and Engagement Officer at the Peace Museum, and welcome to our Zoom meeting today. The Peace Museum is in Bradford in West Yorkshire and is the only museum of its kind in the UK, with a really unique collection of over 7,000 objects that tell the stories of peacemakers locally in Bradford, but nationally and internationally as well.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Rhiannon and I'm the Deputy Museum Manager at Horsham Museum, which is in West Sussex. I've been there since 2018. Horsham Museum and Art Gallery is run by Horsham District Council and we have around 60,000 visitors a year. The museum was founded by members of the Free Christian Church in 1893, and they created a museum society to promote the collecting of objects as well as doing tours and excursions to historical sites. We moved to our current site in 1939 and we're on the historic Causeway, which is one of the most beautiful streets in Sussex, and we've been part of the council since 1974. We have collections ranging from photography to art, agriculture, transport. It's an incredibly diverse collection that covers the history and people of Horsham District, and we have a team of 9 staff and around 65 really dedicated volunteers. I'll be truthful, I already know Shannon. We used to work together at the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, and we've kept in touch ever since. And during one of our weekly Zoom quizzes, we sort of came up with the idea of a buddy scheme for museum professionals across the country. And we thought it'd be really nice to have something positive come out of what has been a really difficult time for a lot of people. So we're hoping that Museum Buddy will help people build social media skills, forge new links with colleagues across the country, and maybe even find something a little bit surprising in their own collections.
Real, thanks, Ree. So we were looking at what could possibly connect the Peace Museum in Bradford and Horsham Museum in Sussex. And we really started to have a look in the collections, and we found that there is actually a really strong connection about peace celebrations. Given that this week is VE Day as well, on Friday, we thought we'd explore this a little bit further, and we found that we both have quite significant collections relating to the peace celebrations that took place after the First World War. So as we know, the war came to an end. The armistice was signed on the 11th of November 1918, but it took over 6 months for the peace process to be completed. And on Friday, the 28th of June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in Paris, which brought an official end to the war. So that's a whole 6 months it took. Once the treaty was signed, the government then decided that there should be a National Peace Celebration Day, and it was scheduled for the 19th of July at 1919. So lots of places across the country started to plan for this day, and in our collections we found reference to what happened in Bradford and to what happened in Horsham. Now in Bradford there were many discussions that took place leading up to the 19th of July, and many were calling for a big grand peace parade to take part across the city. But for many veterans who'd come home from the war, they didn't agree with this. Many veterans had come home to houses that were horrible, no homes fit for heroes. They might have come back to their jobs being taken or their jobs gone. Their children might have been hungry, and some of their colleagues were still far away because not all soldiers had been demobilised by July 1919. And for many, they saw it as a bit of an insult that the government was willing to spend so much money on a huge peace celebration when these veterans were not being looked after. And we also need to remember that many of them were disfigured and had horrible injuries and mental health issues for many years to come as well. So in Bradford, because of this growing opposition to the idea of a big kind of peace parade around the city, the actual day itself ended up being a very different affair. A small kind of commemorative service took place and the parade was scrapped in favour of this kind of smaller, more respectful kind of marking of the occasion. Now, in the Peace Museum's collection, we've got various objects relating to the post-war peace period, including a 1919 copy of the Treaty of Versailles, which is one of my favourite objects because I studied it at school and I absolutely love it. And we've also got a peace certificate that was actually given out by the Mangotsfield Council, which is near Gloucestershire, I think. So we do have quite a lot of things in our collection. And we did an exhibition called A Flawed Peace about the peace process in 2018 to coincide with the centenary. And it's also worth saying, whilst in Bradford, a small affair did take place, some veterans and some people took their kind of distaste at the government to an extreme, and some cities actually saw rioting take place. So in Luton, the town hall ended up being burned down by rioters on the street who were protesting at the council's handling of the day, and the fact that they were not being looked after in the way that they thought they should.
Oh, well, that's really interesting, because actually in Horsham we kind of ended up with the opposite result, in that there were two celebrations of peace. So from the moment the government announced there would be a sort of national celebration 19th of July, Horsham to discuss what they felt would be the most appropriate response to peace. I will quickly show you a poster. Here we go. So there was a big public meeting to discuss the options, but it turned out that there was actually already another plan for a peace celebration in place. For many years in Horsham, they'd held carnivals, and they were huge town events. They were really popular and people loved them, but throughout the war they'd been on hold. So the Carnival Society had decided to organise their own celebration of peace on the 24th of July or the 14th of August. So obviously that's kind of cutting it quite close with the existing celebration. And so there's a lot of discussion about what would be the most appropriate thing to do. There were suggestions that perhaps the carnival could amalgamate with the celebration on the 19th, and a vote was up to the people of the town, and they decided that they wanted celebrations. So Horsham held two events, one on the 19th of July and one on the 24th. So the kind of official celebration on the 19th started at 10:30 a.m. Session into the town centre by current and ex-servicemen, and there was a short service in the Carfax, which is right in the town centre, at 11:30. The public had been encouraged to put flowers at the spot where the service would take place, kind of first thing in the morning, so it looked all pretty. And at 1 there was a dinner and entertainments for the over 65s. And there was a sports day at 2:30 for local children, and then towards the end of the day there was a torchlight procession, and flares that encircled the town were lit for the night. The Peace Carnival was kind of a lot more relaxed, so they did have a service as well, but it featured open air music. There was an Old English fair, the Horsham Town Prize Band played until 10 p.m, and there was dancing and a lot of merriment. There were fireworks, confetti, and they had their own torchlit procession as well. And the tickets for the event cost £1, but the money went to support the local cottage hospital. So in addition to the sort of larger celebrations that were held in the town and across the district, it was always agreed that the town wanted to have something to mark the end of the conflict, something physical. On the 11th of January 1919, the local paper, the West Sussex County Times, reported that the council would be holding a special public meeting. They seemed to really enjoy those, and discussing options about what they could do to construct a permanent memorial to those who died in the conflict. Very similar to in Bradford, there were quite different views on what would be the most appropriate thing to do. A design had been approved. It was by Arthur Walker, who was a member of the Royal Academy, but the cost was very high. It was £4,000, and some people felt that that was a lot of money to waste on a memorial, and that those who'd laid down their lives would actually prefer the money to go directly into the community and benefit the people of Horsham District. But others felt very strongly that it was important to have something, a place where people could go to pay their respects and to mark all those lives that were lost. So conversation carried on for a couple of years before a decision was actually reached. But eventually it was agreed that a memorial should be put into the town centre, and that it would contain the names of all of the fallen. And the final memorial was unveiled on the 13th of November 1921.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, isn't it? And I think that was probably reflected across the country. There's so many discussions about what was appropriate, and obviously with it being such an emotional kind of thing, especially not just for the veterans but for the families as well who lost loved ones. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. about how the country kind of came together to remember, and it's something that we still obviously do every year today, and those memorials still exist today, and it's a part of our kind of national culture as well.
Yeah.
And I think it reminds us about the impact that World War I really did have across the country. And I think it's interesting that we were quite different up here. I mean, Bradford in relation to Horsham, about the way the parade, you know, that never actually happened. Maybe that's because here in Yorkshire, the impact of the war with the Powells, the Yorkshire Regiment was essentially decimated during the Battle of the Somme. But also West Yorkshire has a really interesting history of radicalism as well. It was a hotbed for conscientious objectors during World War I, particularly in Bradford and Huddersfield as well, which is just the town next door. In Bradford itself, in 1917, a small group of mainly working class women formed the Bradford Women's Humanity League, and they ended up doing a protest across Bradford City Centre in September 1917 that about 3,000 people attended, and it was an anti-war, you know, calling for the government to end the war and to end the suffering. And the Independent Labour Party was founded in Bradford as well. So there's this kind of these kind of roots of radicalism. So maybe that kind of explains some of the reasons why Bradford was perhaps different to Horsham. But yeah, a reminder of how World War I really, you know, to this day continues to impact our kind of national memory, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, it's been great to chat to you, Shannon, and I hope people have enjoyed the things that we've kind of brought up. It's certainly been a good kind of pause for thought when we're so close to VE Day. So yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really hope people enjoy the rest of our museum buddy content as well. So you have to keep an eye out on our Twitter feeds.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, we found lots of other really interesting connections as well. But yeah, thank you very much.